to talk about the structure of the atom. So about the structure of the atom. We just want to know what are the things that are used to make up an atom. The structure of the atom. The structure of the atom. Before we know the structure of the atom, we have to discuss a little bit about it. Where is it coming from? The main topic is called the structure of the atom, or the atomic structure. The atom is a Greek word. It is a Greek word, means that it is not an English word. It was delivered from the Greek language. And it was done in that kind of the way because the first one who discussed about atom was a Greek philosopher. So a Greek philosopher known as Democritus was the first to consider the idea that matter is made up of the particles. So Democritus was the first one to consider about it. Matter is made up of the tiny particles called atoms. He was the first one to consider that matter is made up of the tiny particles. Tiny particles means smallest particles. And he did that consideration 400 years before Christ. Before the born of Christ, 400 years before the born of Christ. That before Christ. So that was Democritus. So he thought the idea that matter is made up of the tiny particles called atoms. And at that time, he didn't convince people. Why? Because he didn't have what we call it experimental evidence. So the first person who considered about matter is made up of the thin particles or small particles called atoms was Democritus. But since there was no experimental evidence to support his idea, it was not accepted. Nobody accepted that idea because there was no experimental evidence to support his idea. That was very important. Then later, about 2,000 years, an Englishman called John Dalton brought back the discussion. Democritus did it. And since it was not accepted, he left it. But he put some sort of written documents. So after 2,000 years, an Englishman came and brought back the discussion about matter is made up of the tiny particles called atoms. But at this time, people accepted this idea of Dalton. Why is it so? Because he used the experimental evidence to convince people that matter is made up of tiny particles called atoms. So John Dalton, an Englishman, convinced people that matter is made up of the tiny particles, and he used the experimental evidence to convince them, not empty words. So he just used the experimental evidence to convince. So, but the first one was called Democritus, and the second one was called John Dalton. These are Englishmen. It is therefore they came up with the definition of atom. It is therefore now John Dalton came up with the definition of atom, and in which he said, atom is the smallest part of an element that has all the chemical properties of that element. So in short, matter is where now we find the atom. Matter is where now we find atom. In the absence of matter, we cannot find atom. So atom is inside matter, inside the matter. And that's why we have gas, we have liquid, and we have solid. Because states of matter, we have three of them. We have solid state, we have liquid state, and we have gaseous state. So they say, if that's the case, atom is the smallest particle of an element which can take part in a chemical reactions. When the elements are reacting or elements are getting together, which are responsible are called atoms. Atoms are there to make sure that the reaction is there, to make sure that the reaction is happening. In absence of the atom, no reactions. And that's why we have said an atom is the smallest particle of an element that has all the chemical properties of that element. And in chemistry, when you are talking about chemical properties, you mean of the reaction of that element. Okay. If now you're talking the chemical reaction of oxygen, now you mean of oxygen, the reaction of oxygen with other elements. How does it react with other elements? That is the chemical reactions, chemical properties of oxygen. And that is why we say an atom is the smallest particles of an element, which can take part in a chemical reactions. Or in other words, is the smallest particle of an element that has all the chemical properties of that element.